This program is sponsored by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, this is Sue and Talk Cosmos. We have Planet Buzz today, and our topic is going to be it's unexpected, discovering unexpected purpose. This is the better side, the worse side, the whole side of life, because every moment we have choices and a new way to integrate and to embody everything that transpires. The subject really is focused on a conjunction. It is between Mars, which is an action-oriented, driving, ambitious consciousness that we need. We need our mojos of existence. And it's the ignition point, the engine. And Uranus, which they're both in Taurus. And Uranus is way an outer planet, has 84-year cycle. Of course, I'm going to go through this, and I don't mean to take up too much time here. But really, the emphasis is this is rather spectacular in its own way. Every time that Mars conjuncts with Uranus, it's a meaningful cycle. So let's find out more with our great panel.
Focusing on perspectives of pattern planet cycle relationships and understanding their archetypal energy consciousness, reflecting through history, current events, mythology, and philosophical questions, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I am Sue Rose Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018, an evolutionary astrologer and student of vibrational astrology, a consultant, workshop facilitator, lecture speaker, writer, Dwarf Planet University graduate, charter member of Kepler Astrology Toastmaster Club, hold an AA degree and Associate of Fine Arts Music degree, and Certificate of Fine Arts in Jazz. I'm an artist, musician, mythologist, and pursue esoteric philosophies.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strengths, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Learn more at mythicsky.com.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
hi, is my sound okay? I hope. I'm sorry.
You need to change your microphone. Let's go ahead and introduce Louise, if one of you can do that.
Sue, if you want to switch slides. Or Louise, you want to introduce yourself while Sue's getting the mic worked out?
Sure. So I'm Louise Eddington. I'm the Cosmic Owl of Cosmic Owl Astrology, and I am an OPA certified astrologer. That's the Organization for Professional Astrology. I am also a peer group leader for OPA, and I'm going to be an OPA mentor next year. I'm also certified in Ariel Gutman's Venus Star Point work, but I've been working with Venus for a lot longer. I run a Venus retrograde class every 19 months when Venus is retrograde, and I'm also the author of 3 books. Is that covering everything? Oh, and I podcast. I do a lot of content. I write on Substack, and I do a lot of video on my YouTube channel, Cosmic Owl Astrology. So there you go.
That was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Louise. And thank you for taking the helm. I have a Yeti mic and it seems to have a mind of its own, but I think this conjunction is my Mars return and Uranus is just shattering a few things. But we're so glad to have you. This is really.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for asking me, Sue. Yeah,
Yes.
or both of you.
And we have a chart just to begin with for people to see. With on the left hand side are all the different iconic symbols, glyphs of the astrology, so that you can check those in case you're unaware of what one might be. But where are these planets in our solar system? Mars, the inner planet. It's actually inner, but it's on the other side of us towards the outside. And then Uranus, the past Jupiter and between Jupiter and Neptune. So it's a long cycle.
Saturn and Neptune.
Saturn and Neptune. Yes, where Chiron intermingles. That's right. The wonderful healer, exactly, between our mundane or our reality of consensus, or however we might consider that. Because Capricorn, Saturn is a realist in certain perspectives, a dream, visionary perspective. And
of course, Uranus broke the bounds of our visible universe, so that kind of gives you an indication of what he's like.
Perfect. And it rotates on its side and spins backwards. It really breaks the rhythm. It's absolutely true.
He broke open everything, really. So the discovery in 1781 was really brought a lot of change, as we've seen if we can look back over history. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely, with both revolutions between this country and England. Venus we have here because Venus is the ruler, the expositor of Taurus for people. And Venus also spins backwards, amazingly. I have thoughts about that. I wonder sometimes maybe they're correct and everything else is wrong. I'm not sure. So there is mythology, which we all love, as far as we three panelists here. Uranus, that is how the Greeks spelled it, as you might see it, Oranous. And we do have a podcast, so sometimes I bring up these points. And Gaia, which is Earth, but they were the first creators. And Uranus thought they were monstrous and stuffed them into Earth. And to me, that really represents shadows and repression. And if we just look at some of the code words, we might say the ground is our roots, which Taurus is. It's a fixed Earth sign. And Uranus is the king of this, not king, but the god of the sky, the full beyond.
Yeah.
I like that Lord. I kind of like that Stephen Forrest calls him the Lord of Lightning Bolts, because Richard Tarnas said he should have been called Prometheus, who brought the fire to humans. So, he's kind of a bit sparky, shall we say?
Absolutely. And isn't it?
Well, he
go ahead, Laura.
I think in keeping with what Richard Tarnas has said, right, that a lot of what we as astrologers attribute to Uranus archetypally is much more Promethean than the sky god creator, right? That it's this revolution, rebel with a cause, innovative, cutting edge, breaking the mold, which is all these other things we were saying, which is part of that energy. And then where the overlap is potentially with the creation, right, is Prometheus being the creator of humanity, the creator of humans, right, in the mythology of Prometheus and Epiphanies, his brother. And so this creativity and protectiveness of Prometheus, that's still rebellious, right? I'll do whatever I need to take care of you, sort of, even if it's breaking, even if it's not what society thinks is appropriate.
Yeah, I often describe it as a kind of a big wake up call, a bit like being slapped around the head with a big 4x4 or something. If you're not listening to Uranus, that is. So,
Absolutely. And it really is an intuitive energy, meaning that it's not just a linear instruction manual. So that if those, by listening, it is recognizing the signs, some kind of a shift that's happening and responding to it. But my best hope is really that with this return of Uranus in Taurus, that will bring our roots with divinity again. You know, that idea of so many mythologies where the four, like in Mayan astrology, the four corners are held up by gods, or not necessarily gods, but their story in their Popol Vuh. But there's that connection between the vast universe and our Earth.
And I think that we get that, at least with this current cycle with Uranus being in Taurus, right, brings in some of that more earthy quality of
That's
it. And that archetypally of sky god and Pachamama, Mother Earth, the Taurus is like the most earthy of all the earth signs in terms of the element, natural elemental world, right? And so then it is them coming together. It is Pachamama and sky god coming together in this, and what could be co-created with that potentially.
A primordial god. I just thought for Western mythology, which we understand, but maybe for the public here, it's a primordial god because together Uranus and Gaia created the Titans, which are before the Olympians, which has Prometheus and had, well, actually, it doesn't have Prometheus.
Prometheus is a Titan, actually.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, indeed. I'm tonguing anyway. So, in other words, but there were so many of these. Like, why were they monstrous? That's always been a curious thing. And as you delve into it, it's because they have perhaps, you know, it's all our shadows. Too many heads. Maybe it's not particularly focused, or in many ways they're not. It's just that the physicality is always described as a monstrous situation. It's not in our form exactly, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and 2 eyes.
Well, you know, I think that brings in the kind of alien quality of Uranus. It brings in things that are alien to us, but that's not necessarily in a bad way. Sometimes it's just things we don't understand that are very new, because Uranus often brings really big innovation as well and new discoveries. So so it might, and it seems monstrous at the time. Like, look at people's fear of AI that's rising up with Uranus in Taurus, you know. It's like, but people are beginning to learn how to use it, and it still could be bad and it still could be really good, but or maybe a bit of both, you know. All of those things.
Indeed. And Uranus is also the father of Venus, Aphrodite. And along, you know, with that, it's so amazing because Aphrodite is of what we're attracted to, essentially, what we love, because what we love is what we're attracted to. But along with that were the Furies. You know, it was not always a smooth, there were ruts in the road, you might say.
Aphrodite had her shadow too, though, I will say. So,
yes,
we won't get into that.
And she came from pain, you might say. She came from rather a violent upbringing. You know, it was with the cutting of his genitals because of stuffing, just to take the full thread back, because of this stuffing in Gaia. Gaia decided, hey, we've got to stop this. But Mars, shall we talk about Mars a little bit? I have some thoughts up there.
I'm so glad that you put God of agriculture as well as God of war, because he was a guardian of agriculture as well. So Mars has that both driven, forward-moving, kind of more driven kind of energy, but also that more protective, defensive, guardian kind of energy. And I think a lot of the time we focus too much on the war side of Mars. Though, you know, there's definitely that side as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's partly maybe just because in general society, particularly with women, right? Like women being driven is not something that in our culture is typically embraced very comfortably.
Yes.
Right. And so that the idea that drive somehow has to be aggressive, right? And so it's still that sort of warrior energy as opposed to just driven. And that could be that agriculture of like, okay, well, what that plowing of the land, the sowing, right? That is the action that's necessary to get something accomplished, which doesn't have to be aggressive. It's just the necessary steps to take. And Mars being helpful in being, it's where we can be, how we're proactive or not, or where we struggle to be proactive, right? And it's Mars and Taurus can struggle with that. I sometimes think of that Mars Taurus is like, oh, Ferdinand the Bull, like doesn't really want to go anywhere.
Because
I
Mars
dream of it all the time.
Because Mars definitely likes speed, you know.
Right.
He likes things fast, and Taurus is not speedy, so it gets that energy is a little bit frustrated. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you've inspired me both to think. I wonder what the Earth thought as it was getting tilled, though. Maybe it thought it was quite violent to have everything ripped up and putting little seeds in it and all of that.
Wow.
However, you know, but I do like that analogy of agriculture bringing in causes and defense, because oftentimes that motive is to either defend something or to create a cause. Besides becoming, you know, it's very individuated that way.
Well, Taurus is very much about what's sustainable, isn't it? You know,
Yes.
And sustainability. So I think we're seeing a lot of that with Uranus journey through the sign of Taurus, and I think we'll see some of that as well as some of the shadow with this conjunction that we'll talk about as soon as we get to it.
Yes. And just to mention to people, perhaps I had earlier, but Mars orbits 2 years around the sun, and Uranus is 84 years. And so these conjunction periods in this particular sign, in Taurus, are in 1768 to 72, every 2 years. There were actually 3 in 1776. And of course, this is, and I know, thankfully, we're going to really flesh this out a bit, because people do get a bit alarmed thinking, oh dear, it's before the wars. But it is true. Life has its storms, and yet many times, even in a fire, there's new seedlings that birth. So we'll look at different things. And in 1851 to 57, which is prior to the U.S. Civil War, but you know, the difference was, I will bring up, in 1768, in the 70s, Europe, besides the U.S. having the Revolutionary War, Europe had elevated food prices and deaths, elevated deaths. It was significantly a difficult year, I understood when I Googled.
But also in 1772, very close to the actual conjunction itself, which was conjunct Algol, which we'll probably talk about in a bit, the fixed star Algol. James Cook began his second voyage to the South Seas to find the southern continent. So there was discovery as well. You know, I think we often kind of look at the shadow, and you know, I wish we wouldn't always.
Absolutely. I think there were some in the 1700s period. So the 1768 was like December, almost January, right, for the 1768. So at the beginning of 1769, in April of that year, James Watts patented the steam engine, and and we get the word watts, like how we still measure energy, which is so associated with Uranus, with his last name. That's why we measure energy in watts.
I love this. I love both of this.
Right. Yes. So that's very Uranian, and that momentum of Mars, that and manipulating the natural world, which is Taurus, right? And then this invention. So there can be these very positive, very innovative ways of even being innovative of how we look at the conjunction, as opposed to simply textbook, oh, well, it's right before the Uranus ingresses into Gemini and it's always war. Like, okay, but
I know
there's these other things.
I don't think we're going to go into those past charts in detail, but I would love to say that 1772 conjunction was conjunct Algol at 22 degrees Taurus. But in that year, the three were the only planets or planetary bodies in Taurus. And there was a lot of differences in the charts. And there was a coup. There was a coup in Sweden. Gustav III of Sweden completed a coup by adopting a new constitution and installing himself as an enlightened despot, which ended 50 years of parliamentary rule. And the Swedes had a royal family, which was actually a very benevolent one for a long time. So, all this fear we're kind of hearing about war and things like that, I think we have to remember we don't know where it will show up necessarily. And we already are at war, Ukraine and so already.
Yes. And I'm really glad to get a fuller viewpoint. I know that when I put these down prior to the wars, because I wanted to address the elephant in the room that, yes, it was this period. But again, we've gone through it, and it has often there's a renaissance involved in some ways, I think, in many ways. 1850, 1851, for instance, Europe had a lot of new technology. I think it was, I should have written it down what it was, but it was a fascinating they have names of certain machines, and I just can't remember which one it was. But the Crimean War, which is also down in Ukraine, happened during that time. So it's very fascinating that this is like the thread continues. And of course, it was successful. They stopped Russia. And that's quite a history to look into.
So, I think there often are times of upheaval, let's say, and a lot of change, but they're not always as violent as what the last one that we're going to look at in 42. But I have opinions on that one too. So.
Well, let's jump to that then. 1936, which was, of course, a very difficult year here in the United States. It was a recession. It was not just that; it was the Depression, and there was also food shortages. There was a Dust Bowl, but 1942 of all these years is the only one that is exactly at 26 degrees Taurus, and we have a chart later to show that. But just for people's quick reference, this cycle was 2021 at 6 degrees on January 20th, 2022 at 18 degrees. This is Taurus, August 1st. And now we have in 2024, which will be tomorrow on the 15th, 26 degrees Taurus.
Now, the 6 degree one on 2021 was on Inauguration Day, and it was square the nodes of the USA, by the way. So, but yes, we've got upheaval, but also we have a president who, I'm not giving an opinion. It's just factually he has achieved a lot and brought a lot of change. So, that was on his inauguration day. Incidentally, 6 degrees was also square his Pluto, so Biden's Pluto.
Squares are good action. And I remember President Obama mentioning democracy is messy. And really, I think especially now with all our Gemini, we were commenting early prior to the course, it's just amazing how all the communication, you might say, that's going on about
Yes.
it's a lot to decipher, but we need that. We need to break that up
Mhm.
and form new opinions, new healing, new information. Well,
Mhm.
Well, and that again, that can be part of that revolutionary action. It's like
yes,
doing things in new ways, breaking ground. I mean, that's even historically
Mm.
some of what happened, right? So in the 42, it was the founding of the United Steelworkers Union, which seems
Yes.
very Uranus Mars conjunct in Taurus. And even with the inaugurations, like we got the first female African American vice
Yes.
president in history.
Yeah.
Whatever you think about her as a politician, like it's still revolutionary. It's still groundbreaking.
yep,
It's still forever will always be true that is how going
Yeah.
forward has changed. And so remembering that of looking at what has that's part of the potential. Yeah,
Mhm.
right. That the
Mhm.
potential is like,
yeah,
what do we want to revolutionize? What do we want to transform or
Mhm.
bring forward? Right, because it's Mars. How do we want to do things in a different way going forward?
yeah. Discover unexpected purpose. Exactly.
Mhm.
We're going to look. Oh, go ahead,
I
Louise.
just
Yes.
wanted to say regarding the 42 one as well, because if people go and just look at the history of 42, they go, oh my goodness, it was during the war. It was the year that concentration camps became a thing and people started being put in them. But Saturn was in Taurus, and Saturn is confinement, and Saturn was approaching a conjunction with Uranus then, and we don't have
Yes.
that. We do not have Saturn
Big
in Taurus
difference. I
right
noticed
now.
that. Absolutely. And I will say too that because Pluto is opposing Pluto, and
Uh-huh.
for people to realize the
Mhm.
current one is on the inside and it is a 0 degrees chart. So everything's going to be
Yeah.
according to the zodiac, and the outer is 1942. But Pluto was out of bounds in 1942, and
Yeah.
it's not now. We have
No.
Ceres, which is a nurturing energy.
Mostly.
But most amazingly, it was not only the Mars Uranus conjunction, but Jupiter was having a return at that time too.
Yeah,
So
but as well, we had a Jupiter Uranus conjunction before the Mars Uranus
As the lead
conjunction.
in, yeah.
But
mm,
it was further. It was before the Mars Uranus conjunction by more months than this one.
Mhm.
We had a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in April here, but to
yes,
go back to the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in 40, it was actually in 41. That was actually almost to the day the Blitz ended on the UK, and the tide started to turn against the Nazis. So
oh,
all these things kind of
it's sudden. Yes, really, it isn't just a linear, logical schedule of things. It's this
Uh-huh,
combustion, you might say, of life that's like
uh-huh,
Gaia and Uranus that are birthing things, and then
yeah,
and then with Venus, it has that attraction. It pulls magnetic
yeah.
things. So
And
there's a lot
because we've just had the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in April, and now we've got this Mars Uranus conjunction, we will see the local kind of events that will, like last night in the US, but also I think it's kind of, they've come very close together, April to July.
yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
We can see that in the war, it started a big turning point in many ways, and not just in the war. I think you've talked about some things as well, Laura, and I think we're at a real turning point and breakthroughs. And will it need a war to sort out? Maybe, or will the war just be the one that's the one we've got ongoing as well? Will there be a turning point in the Middle East and in Ukraine and Russia? I think especially as in the US, we tend to think, oh, this is what happened in the US, so it's going to happen again. I don't.
Not necessarily. It's true. First of all, too, if we just consider that Pluto is in Aquarius. Aquarius is of our mental minds, and it wants to gather together in community, whereas Leo is people are thinking very much independent and in a different way. And the times were somewhat different. What was I? One last thought, because we're a little past our break-off time. Go ahead. Yes.
No, I was just seeing it was time for a break. So, you go with your thoughts.
There was some comment, but however it is, we'll come back. So return with us. We have Louise Eddington and Dr. Laura Tadd. It's Planet Buzz, discovering unexpected purpose. And it's right here in our threshold. Thank you. We'll be here. Thank you. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. Currently, we are in the period of Cancer. By leaving a cycle based on connecting mental communication to the external, the energy of Cancer involves emotions, which create our personal story through our emotional associations and attachments. As a cardinal water sign that is nurturing, Cancer needs to process emotions in one's own internal rhythm of cycles in order to complete an evolution.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to newprosupplements.com, we cover the world of animals. This week, July 21st, it's Best Neuroenergetic Balancing, Energy Codes, and Rasmussen Reset Sunday. Dr. Nels Rasmussen and Linda Rasmussen join us to take your phone calls and help you or your animal friends with emotional, behavioral, or physical issues. Hope you can join us and plan to call in for your free remote treatments. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific on KKNW. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Alternative Talk 1150. Local talk for the body, mind, and soul.
Well, here we are. And we'll go on to our second part. And I remember it was something about the war issue, but I think we covered it very well. So here we have both Louise Eddington, and her website is louiseeddington.com, and Dr. Laura Tadd is at mythicsky.com. And of course, you can find me at Talk Cosmos. And we do thank you for joining and subscribing. But Louise, perhaps you can mention about your books and about your future workshop that you're...
Yeah. Well, I'm the publisher of the 3 books you see on the screen. The one on the right, The Complete Guide to Astrology, is a bestseller in the Amazon category for astrology. And I'm proud of them all. And I also would love to just mention again my Venus retrograde class. It starts next February, which seems ages away, but it's going to go really fast. And if anybody comes and follows me, there is a wait list to hear when it's available. Oh, sorry, Nathan. Yes. I forgot not everybody could see the screen. So, yeah. But my book, The Complete Guide to Astrology, is probably the one I would love you to check out the most. So,
sounds good. Thank you. And Laura, I know, please share what...
So nothing super soon coming up, but I will be, it's now on the books. I haven't changed my website yet, but I'll be doing the Goddess Awakening retreat again with my friend Michelle in Nicaragua in February next year. So it'll be the 22nd of February through the 1st of March in Playa El Coco again. So I'll get it updated on my website, but that's starting up again. So it's a beautiful beach in Nicaragua. We're right by a turtle sanctuary, so you get to see at least once while you're there. There'll be baby turtles released into the sea. And we do yoga every morning and yummy local food cooked by beautiful local women. So yeah, we're right on the water. So it's a beautiful place for yoga and meditation and astrology and all kinds of personal processing work. So it's a great healing place to be.
Both of these just sound delightful. I think February, away from the north of the cold and even of the summer. Oh my goodness, it's just beautiful. And myself, I have been joining an astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea once a month. And our next one, it will be Moon and Ceres. And that'll be published probably about the 25th or so of the month. And you can find those on my playlist, videos featuring Sue. So that's on my Talk Cosmos. And I do some blogs, but also I really want to appreciate everybody that does sign up for the YouTube and the newsletter, because we really love having an audience that we can respond with and be there with. So, and thank you so much. Here we have the chart for now. This is tomorrow on the 15th of July at 10:04 a.m. And this is in Washington, D.C. I chose just to keep it relevant to this nation since we seem to have so many things happening so sudden.
And we've clearly seen something happen, you know.
Yes, yesterday was quite an event with former President Trump.
And I'd love to mention Algol at this point. You know, Algol, a fixed star, you know, I there's a lot of fear around that fixed star as well. And I think, you know, we're kind of more evolved and can see the light as well as the shadow. But Algol definitely has to do with the head, and the ancients said decapitation. And isn't it interesting that, you know, the former president was shot in the head, and so was the shooter, and so was the person that died. And Mars is weapons. But I love what you called this, discovering unexpected purpose, because there is that side of it as well. You know, it's like Algol. You probably know the myth really well, Laura, as well. You know, Medusa, the Gorgon. You know, she was. She had I think we have to remember that these myths were written from a certain perspective at a certain time, but
coded quite well. Yes.
Oh yeah, and you know, Medusa was originally kind of an oracle, I believe. And she was, you know, raped by Poseidon and then shamed because women had to be pure. And then so Pallas Athena actually turned her into the Gorgon with the head of snakes. But some suggest that maybe she was turned into that as a form of protection so that she would scare off any more men from abusing her. So, you know, there's those sides of things too about finding your purpose. And I've been reading up a lot on the myth with this conjunction happening, because she's at 26 Taurus. And, you know, there is a side of her where she is a protector, because Pallas Athena then had the head of Medusa on her shield, and that protected her in war. And so, you know, there's a kind of mirroring protective side to Algol as well, which I find really interesting with what's going on in the world right now, because the current president has Algol facing, and this conjunction facing his 12th house sun, and he seems to be, you know, deflecting the things that have been coming at him. So, you know.
Yeah, I've studied it as well, because it happens to be conjunct my Mars. So I live with it. So I've really had to, you know, to get past that fear deeply, and really need to scrub the news to find out, or information to find out more. But remembering that I think she had been consumed by in Pallas's temple. And of course, that was, she was blamed for this, but yet that is like the melodrama of it. It's very true because her head, if you looked at it, you turned to stone, but really digging deeper into that, that's when a person was very contained. In other words, it was, they didn't think of other people. They were only looking at themselves. And so that would be like, and Athena is a great strategist. So that would be a useful weapon. It's most intriguing. But most of all, I will end my little commentary here that I have read that with Algol, you're unable, you must witness, you must be a witness to all the really harsh, difficult parts of life. It doesn't mean one needs to experience it, but you can't, your eyes are just not closed to it.
And I to mention that opposition to President Biden's 12th house son and his Scorpio stellium, he's been a witness to his first wife and baby daughter dying and his son dying of brain cancer, head. And, he's experienced that. But it's kind of taught him his purpose of compassion for others and things like that. You could say that's one way of looking at it. So, because he's faced it all his life, like you've got the conjunction.
Yes, exactly. And I've been surrounded by people with very deeply painful life experiences. So it's just.
So you've witnessed it rather than experienced it as much. So
I think well, I can't say that 100%.
No. Well, I think we've all had some tragedy in our lives.
Yeah. But somehow it didn't get the best of me by the grace of something.
But and I think it is important, this idea of like bearing witness to something.
Yeah.
Right. And that also, so that it's seen, like whoever, like that story is told, it's remembered. It's right. There's something about that and recognizing somebody else's suffering, right? That again, like circles back to that part of the Promethean story. He was recognizing his creations of humanity weren't going to survive. He was witnessing that. And so he took action to take care of what he saw to be a danger. Right. And
could I give an opinion about what might emerge from this conjunction with Algol?
Please.
One of the things, at least, we can see, clearly that women's rights have been stripped away and things, and this is a Venus guided conjunction. And I've actually got a T-shirt with the head of Medusa that says "Petrify the patriarchy." But I like to think of it. As not only scaring the patriarchy, but actually kind of turning it to stone, like the head of the Gorgon did. And I kind of really, with that revolutionary vibe and the drive of Mars, and the fixed star. I actually really think we are going to see a big rising up of not only women, but those that support women and other people whose self-worth and bodily rights, which is very Taurus, are being taken away.
That is quite exciting. And if you look at this chart, listening to you speak, I'm realizing like in the pale blue for those people, that is the connections, the sextiles that are connecting. So there's a lot of interconnection and small, easy flow. I mean, it's work at it, but it's not work. It's just a connective process. Besides having, I'm amazed at that T-square with Pluto, which of transformation and rebirth of Haumea. So we're in this long scene, this theater of life that has many stages, because rebirth is not instant.
And Hygeia there, she's preventative health, really, holistic health,
for the
and
better.
and in the sign of Taurus and in the body again. So,
It's true.
yeah. And Venus,
so,
the
Oh,
guide,
yeah.
sorry, she's at for Leo, which is up there at the North Node of the USA again.
Oh, that's what I wanted to mention.
Mhm.
Back on the conjunction of 21 April,
Mm,
when Jupiter and Uranus were conjunct, it was exactly when the USA had their Chiron conjunction in
Yep.
Aries. Yeah.
Yep.
And in fact, so really we're in this enormous pathway of finding our identity, of reestablishing this identity. Instead of being a pie in the sky theory, it's practicality, because all dreams are dreams, but we need to manifest them. Slowly, we've done civil rights from having Black people voting to women voting finally. It's a process.
Well, and I
Just
think too,
mentioned
so
too.
where
And
one of the
gays.
benefits with Mars coming in, it's like, so maybe there's this awakening that happened with the Jupiter Uranus conjunction that was on my Jupiter. But then the Mars, it's like, so now what are you going to do about it? Like maybe you've had some of the ahas, but now what? Like it only does so much if you don't take action. And that taurine energy, maybe it's slow to get going, right? But it's because there's a methodicalness to it. It's like, I'm going to do it concretely. I'm going to do it with a deliberateness, as opposed to the rushing that Mars is really vulnerable to. And then you have to do it again because you missed some of the detail. That, there was an awakening that happened in April that now action, right? So that seeing maybe how stuff is shifting politically, or what's happening in terms of different decisions that are being made within at a smaller scale, within like communities or families, but we saw that even with what's going on with the elections in Europe, right? That like France was leaning one way and then nope. On a dime.
And look in the UK as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. And I might add, though, Jupiter changed from Taurus to Gemini. So, when you think about the fact that it's verbal, Taurus is not necessarily a verbal sign. It's more of an artistic sign, and it's pre-verbal. But Gemini, everybody's sharing their opinions.
But you could, to go to your thing about, taking action, or it could also be seen as what are you fighting for? Everybody always thinks as fighting against something.
Right.
I really think, putting a lot of things together, because I'm always looking every day, and I write on my Substack all the time, that there really is that element of rebirth and finding our identity in this kind of new world that we're going into, and really discovering our purpose in a world that's very different to what we've been in ever before. So,
Looking at this chart. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, just that I think just to build on what Louise is saying, that idea, like, what are you fighting for? I keep using the phrase because I've been juggling a lot with my mom having passed. And so like, there's a lot of what we're prioritizing and what I care about prioritizing, or it's like, what hill do I want to die upon? Right. It's the language I keep using. Yeah. Because it's like, well, there's some stuff I'm going to really hold my ground to with different things, and others I'm like, it's just not worth my energy. There's more important priorities to put my energy into. And so that being part of this too is what could that value of Taurus, prioritizing value of where we're putting our energy.
Value, meaning, and purpose. Absolutely. And causes is true. Before we leave this chart for the next one, which is essentially the same with a few other aspects, one reason I brought it up first was I was thinking, well, it shows how Mars and Uranus are connected to the rest of this universe, the sky with all those. But then also look at the sun. The sun is in a beautiful flow with both Neptune and Saturn. It's a
Mhm.
very, I think it's in a trine. So in other words, and it's also in a trine to strategist Athena.
Parasithemia. Yeah.
Yeah. So shall we look at the next, and then we can always go back. This
Oh.
one isn't much different. It's the same chart, but I did mention this yod that it has in the brown with Ceres, which is the
And
nurturer, and Ceres is out of bounds. Go
And
ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned she's out of bounds. I'm actually, one of the books I'm writing, because I write in obsessively, is on Ceres, and I find she is nurturing, but she's also about our needs met and unmet. And in Capricorn, I'm finding that she is showing us where our needs are not met by the structures of our society, if we're looking at it as a whole. And so if you bring in that yod, that's a real big look at that. So,
Excellent.
so, yeah.
What I love about Ceres, when I studied it with the dwarf planet with Alan Clay, and was that she's an inner dwarf planet because she's between Mars and Jupiter. And she lived on Earth while she was looking for Persephone and hid her divinity, always trying to make the divinity work for her by burning out the mortality of this one little baby that she was taking care of until she was discovered. And at that point, she switched to part of the story that is hardly ever brought up, it seems to me. Again, as we're talking, so much is unsaid. And that is that there was a brother. Now, in mythology, maybe it was like a baby like Hermes was and just brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't know. But this brother, this twin brother, Ceres taught agriculture to, so that the child could sustain itself. And to me, that's really where in Ceres, rather than you are the goddess, men or women, and instead of showing your godly ways, you find where you can give sustenance to that person so that they can, like, for instance, learn how to fish so they can fish and do their own, or bake bread and know how to bake bread.
And look at the other parts of the yod, Vesta in Leo, that's your inner flame in your heart, really, but also the hearth of the state, and Jupiter, which was really kind of the law, the natural law in Gemini. So I think there's going to be some big changes coming to some laws or new laws and whatever, that actually nurture us more.
That sounds sounds good.
On August the 14th, by the way, Mars, this time, because I look back at all those other conjunctions, Mars catches up to Jupiter at 16 Gemini, which is just 2 degrees from the new Venus star point, which we're under now, the evening star, which is the love goddess. So, I think all of this is working really together for a lot of healing, personally.
I like this. We're going to continue the chat, but just to show people that there is playlists and they can find those, and thank everybody here. And Nate, there we are, the 3 of us. This is always the best part, I think. Yes, indeed. It's powerful times. And yet always, I remember a coin has 2 sides, light, dark, you could say, if one's
Always
up or down, but yet it's one coin. So we do need to, and those shadows, just that Uranus stuffed into the earth, that represent what, as you had, we're discussing, were perhaps unfamiliar or things that we just weren't.
Well, right, but shadow is not, it's neutral, right? Shadow is just what we don't like to look at.
Yes.
Right. Whether that's psychologically, I mean, like that's why there's golden shadow psychologically. Right. So shadow is just what we don't like to look at. And so, I think particularly because Mars is part of this, where do we want to put our energy? If we want to put our energy into fear, then more fear is likely to be what manifests, particularly with it in Taurus, because Taurus is so much about manifestation. Right. And if we put our energy and our thoughts into revolution, transformational revolution that is breaking us out of the stuckness of broken systems that we have outgrown,
Yeah.
then there's an opportunity to create something and find language for it once it all shifts into Gemini.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And we have about a minute here. We can talk just like vaudeville going off the stage.
And Gemini is our attention. So where your attention goes, energy flows, just to quote that one. So
that is absolutely good. Yeah,
right. Just like you're driving a car, and if you're looking at something else, you will drift there, right? Yeah. It's just, where do you want to put your energy?
And Venus, if Venus is ruling it, there's many sides to love, which we realize and we know that she has, but yet it can have that higher purpose of agape. So, but thank you. Thank you, Louise Eddington. Thank you, Dr. Laura Tad, and our audience for listening to Mars Uranus 26 Taurus. It's going to be tomorrow and for a while. The stepping stones continue.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next Sunday, 1 p.m. Pacific Time, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.